Welcome everyone to our Wednesday night Bible study with the Dewey Church of Christ. Before we begin tonight, I owe Matt Reams an apology. I went back and watched several of the videos, and there is a buzz. I have done my best. I have reconnected every cord on this whole board. I mean, it's a lot of cords. It's like 30 cords. And I have done my best to remove or eliminate the buzz. There's a slight buzz. I can't get rid of it all the way. Just can't. I don't know why. I don't know how. But I have done my best to remove as much as I can. So Matt, if you're watching, let me know if the buzz is any better. I do want to start with some announcements before we dig into our study of Proverbs tonight. Tonight we are going to continue. Of course, we're going to, through the month of December, we're going to continue in our study of Proverbs. So I want to start with some announcements, and then we'll have a prayer, and then we'll dig into our study. There are no medical updates or health updates. I did send out a newsletter on Tuesday. I will do that every Monday or Tuesday while we're doing this. If you did not get the newsletter and you want the newsletter, make sure the office has your email address, because if we don't have your email address, then I'm not doing it on the bulletin list. This is a different list. This is just if the church has your email. So let me know if that doesn't even make sense. I'm doing it off our church management software email list, which is not the same as the bulletin list. So if you want the newsletter and did not get it on Tuesday, then let me know and I'll add you to it. So that'll have updates from Sunday. It has some stuff for parents and the curriculum stuff for parents at home. So just be aware that that's happening. I want to remind everybody that the all-church event that was planned for the 31st has been canceled. I would say postponed, but we're not doing a New Year's Eve party in February. That's just ridiculous. But we will do something. We'll do some other church event in the future to sort of make up for it. And then the last thing I have on my list, as I look at the list of announcements, two things. Christmas in the Shed, which is the thing that the Brittenhams do with all the trains and Christmas things and stuff, that's still happening. But rather than just being sort of open to a mass flood of the public, you need to prearrange times, one family at a time. So talk to the Brittenhams if you want to do that. And then the last thing is there's a new bulletin board on, how do I describe it from where I am? It's by Derek's office that has a list of ministries that you can support as an individual in the congregation. It has a list of things that we support as a group, but also things that you could support individually, a list of different ministries, so be sure to check that out on Sunday. I think that's it. Keep praying for those with COVID and those with health problems. I'm not going to run through that list. It's all the same as in the newsletter and the bulletin, so just be praying for people. I think that is it. Check my texts. Matt says it does sound better. Bob says that maybe only the young can hear it, and I did kind of think that. I do kind of think the buzz was in a register that you can age out of. So some of you didn't think there was a buzz, but I went back and checked and there was. That's it. So let's have a prayer and then we will dig into Proverbs. God, we thank you for this opportunity we have to study your word together. I ask you please guide our study tonight as we are discovering your wisdom for our lives. Give us honesty with ourselves as we evaluate these things and evaluate our own lives to see how they match up to what you've told us. Give us the intellectual honesty to admit our faults and the humility to seek your wisdom and the boldness to change where we see we need to change. I ask that you please be with those who are struggling with health issues. There are so many. Please give them peace and comfort and healing, and comfort those who have lost loved ones in this. We know that it is a tragedy. Please give them peace and strength. We thank you for the fellowship of your family. We thank you for the sacrifice of your Son. In his name, amen. All right, let's talk about Proverbs tonight. Let's see here. I'm going through my notes here. So, the introduction. We got some introductory material to go over today. Now, I want to sort of do a brief recap of what we talked about last week. We're going to have 4 weeks more because it's a 5 Wednesday month, so we have 4 weeks more of Proverbs. The 4 topics, we're going to look at 4 topics that are heavily present in the book. Not all the topics in the book, but 4 of the main themes. Again, remember, the book of Proverbs is just full of short snippets about life, right? Artfully told, short, 2-line things that are about life, some aspect of life. Now, Proverbs is a wide book. There's a wide list of topics that the authors address, right? Multiple authors of Proverbs. And they use different words: wisdom, knowledge, discernment, prudence, understanding, right? There's all these different flavor of words. But at the end of the day, Proverbs is answering the question, how should I live my life, right? That's the main sort of thrust of the book. How should I live my life? And so we're going to talk about some areas of Proverbs. These are not the only topics in Proverbs, but they're ones we're going to address. Tonight we're going to talk about words, about things that we say. We're going to talk about hard work and laziness. A lot of stuff in Proverbs about hard work and laziness. Social justice, which is a buzzword. People don't like that phrase, but man, he talks a lot about it. So we'll talk about how treatment of the poor and treatment of the oppressed and how we should treat one another. That's basically what this topic is. I use social justice because it's a buzzword and gets attention. And then the last subject that we'll talk about at the very end, which is sort of a summation of a lot of this, is the wise get wiser and the foolish more foolish, the feeding cyclical nature of wisdom. How it is that people who have wisdom tend to get more wisdom, and people who are fools tend to just keep being fools, right? And how do we break out of that cycle? So we're going to talk about that in the last week as we talk about Proverbs. So tonight we are going to talk about words, things that we say. There's a lot of things in Proverbs about, and again, the setup for a lot of the book is Solomon writing things to his son, or collecting wisdom for his son. And so a lot of the stuff that Solomon says is how to speak. Who you should speak to, what you should say, how you should say it, what you shouldn't say. A lot of stuff like that we'll talk about. And as we think about this, we're thinking about how do we have success with our words. But we kind of have to define success, right? What we're looking for when we talk. What we're thinking about, what is our goal when we speak to one another? And it's going to be different based on circumstance, right? If you're at work, you're having a different goal than if with your spouse or with your kids or with your friends, right? We have these situational goals, which is one of the things we'll talk about tonight. But at the end of the day, words have one main purpose, and that is to convey ideas. We want to convey ideas effectively. Maybe we're conveying sympathy and comfort when we're being compassionate in our words. Maybe we're conveying knowledge when we're teaching. We're conveying, maybe we're conveying instruction, right? We want at work, we want somebody to do a task, so we're instructing them how to do it. We're conveying our expectations. We do that in a lot of areas. I do that with my kids, right? This is what I expect of you. So no matter the different situations that we're in, is we're conveying things to another person to get on the same page with them. Now, how that plays out is different in each circumstance, but Proverbs is about how to be successful at that, how to successfully convey your ideas in a way that will be beneficial to what you're trying to accomplish. And again, the things that we're trying to accomplish vary from circumstance to circumstance, but there are some overall guidelines in things, and really thinking about how to avoid messing up our purpose, getting into trouble, ruining relationships, causing bad problems to happen in our lives because of words. So Proverbs is going to have a lot for us about how we should use our speech, right? I'm just checking my phone here. People are texting, seeing if there's any comments. So the first thing, we're going to look at, I think, 4 or 5 things tonight. The first thing we're going to look at, the first piece of sort of overall wisdom for us as we think about how to handle our words, is in some ways the opposite, right? Number 1, stop talking so much. And I was surprised as I went through the book of Proverbs how much Solomon says this. The idea of The first way to be successful with your words is to use less of them, to stop talking so much, stop using so many words. We're going to look at a bunch of, how we're going to do this is we're going to lay out the topic or the sort of main subject. We're going to go through a bunch of verses and talk about those verses, and then we're going to move on to the next subject. So let's read some verses about this. Proverbs 10:18 through 20. Now, some of these as we go through, you're going to be familiar with. Things that sound familiar. Either, I'm going to put this back up. A lot of these are either going to be familiar because you've read them in Proverbs before, but a lot of these are also familiar because culture has co-opted these things, these snippets of wisdom that have sort of filtered into our culture at large, and people don't know they're from the Bible, but they say them all the time. So, Proverbs 10:18 through 20. The one who conceals hatred has lying lips. Whoever utters slander is a fool. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, but the heart of the wicked is of little worth. Now, reminder, I'll put this back up there in a minute. The main teaching tools of Proverbs: contrast, parallelism, and example. Those are the three main teaching tools. When he wants to make a contrast between one thing and another, he wants to reinforce the same idea by saying the same thing over and over in different ways. And then the last one is a snippet or an example or an anecdote, right? So let's put this back up there. We see some of these here. Whoever conceals hatred has lying lips. Whoever utters slander is a fool. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. But whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver, and the heart of the wicked is of little worth. Now, it's interesting. There's a couple of interesting tidbits in here, right? The main one that people think about is the middle line there, right? When words are many, transgression is not lacking. Whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The more you talk, the more likely it is you're going to say something stupid. That's just the way it is in life. We know that. You know people who talk too much, and it doesn't take very long if you're a talker before you put your foot in your mouth, right? Whoever restrains his lips is prudent. Prudent being one of the main synonyms in the book of Proverbs for wisdom, right? Now, there's some interesting other things. The last line there, parallel there, or the last, it's not a duet. Is it a duet? Two lines. The tongue, notice what he contrasts. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. He's contrasting tongue with heart. And why is that? Well, we know that we speak from our hearts, right? Out of the abundance of the heart comes forth words. And so Solomon is contrasting here. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. They say things that are excellent. The righteous person says things that are good, but the heart of the wicked is of little worth, and the things that they say are of little worth because what's in their heart is of little worth too. Now, that first line is the most unusual. Whoever conceals hatred has lying lips, and whoever utters slander is a fool. There's a couple of ways to look at this. Of course, he's again, there's the idea of parallelism or contrast. Is he contrasting these or parallel them? The second line is pretty easy. Whoever utters slander is a fool. What does the first line have to do with that? Concealing hatred. Well, there's really one of two ways you can look at it. Either you're concealing your own hatred, but you know, that sort of plays into the uttering of slander, right? Or you're concealing the hatred of another, maybe. But the idea is what? Be honest. Don't say things that are not true, even things that, again, and we're going to go through this as we go through here. Especially as a king, I don't think Solomon was happy with sort of yes men. People who would just agree with him. They didn't really believe what they were saying. They just agreed with him for no reason, right? I think there's an element that he's using here to bring out. Don't just sort of give lip service to people. Be honest with them in your evaluations and saying the things that you really think. But do so prudently. Don't use an abundance of words. Don't just keep babbling on, right? Restrain your lips. We'll read another text, Proverbs 11:22 through 13. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense, but a man of understanding remains silent. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, but he who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. We're going to see similar ideas repeated over and over here. Whoever belittles his neighbor lacks sense. That's interesting. But a man of understanding remains silent. And I think the element here is You know something maybe that is negative. And it's interesting the way he contrasts these in various places, right? Because in this text, it seems to, I'll put it back up there, maybe a man who knows something about his neighbor that's not great, less than ideal, maybe detrimental to his reputation. A man of understanding does not say that, even if he knows it, especially spreading it to other people, right? Talking maybe in the idea of neighbor, right? Is you're talking about your neighbors. Do you hear what Joe did down the street? Oh man, I can't believe he did such a stupid thing. As opposed to the man of understanding who remains silent, does not belittle his neighbor. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, and we see this sort of in the parallelism here, right? The keeping of secrets versus the revealing of things. Talk less. You don't have to say everything you know. We know stuff, and if it's not beneficial to the other person, if it's not something that will be helpful, just don't say it. This is where we get into trouble, I think most. One of the things that gets us into the most trouble on social media is we just have this impulse to say everything we know. We just want to share, right? We want to be sharing. Some people do, I guess. Some people don't. But a lot of people, it's just like they want to say everything they know all the time. And before social media, they do it in the neighborhood. They do it at work. They do it with their friends, right? They just would gossip and share things. Solomon really indicates over and over and over again to his son, talk less, keep secrets. You don't have to say everything you know. Another one, Proverbs 12:22-25. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. A prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaims folly. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. Anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Now, there's some, I wanted to just include the whole section there, but again, one of the things we see in Proverbs is a lot of jumping around in topics, so I've included in there because I didn't want to put another heading in, but 3 of those are about words, right? So I'll put them back up there. Again, a prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of the fools proclaims folly. Concealing, keeping it to yourself. Because a lot of the times the things we think we know, the things we're so sure about, the things that, oh, I'm definitely right about this, I say it and it's folly. It's wrong. I didn't have all my information right. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are a delight. It's interesting. We're seeing some different ideas about words here. We're going to return to the idea about lying at the end. And then at the bottom, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. Well, a good word as opposed to a bad word, right? And again, we're thinking about wisdom in our words. There's some overlap in these categories. And the reason I included these here is we're going to talk about that last bit, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, and the first bit, lying lips are an abomination. We're going to talk about those in separate sections here. Oops, that was wrong. Another verse. Proverbs 17:27-28. Whoever restrains his word has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. This is one of those that is filtered into popular culture. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. The more modern way of phrasing that is, better to remain quiet and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? That's the modern phrasing, but this, again, comes back to this idea in Proverbs. And again, so many times in Proverbs, hitting the same idea is an important idea in Scripture, right? And this is one of the things for studying books of the Bible. When you note a repeated idea, it's probably important. And how we've seen 4 or 5 times, we've got one more. This is not all of them. These are the ones that I chose out of Proverbs. There's some more that talk about this. The importance of restraining your words, of being controlled in your words. This is the first step to being successful with your words, is to say less of them. It's so hard, isn't it? It's very hard to do. Well, for some people it is. For some people it's really easy to just, they don't want to talk. But I think for most people the problem is we want to share things. We want to say the things we know. I have something in my head and I want other people to know that I know it, or I want to share it with the world. And again, social media has been really bad for this because it's so easy to just post it on Facebook and put it out into the world, or on Twitter or wherever. The wise and understanding person speaks less. That's the main takeaway here. We'll put one more on there. Proverbs 20:19. Whoever goes about slandering reveals secrets, therefore do not associate with a simple babbler. And the implication here is if you're the one who talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, you're the simple babbler. And people don't want to be around you. Why? Because you're going to tell them you're going to tell their secrets. You're going to say things about them. You're going to gossip about them. You're going to tell people what you do wrong. If you're the person that wants to talk all the time and says all the things you ever think, it's going to lead to people not wanting to be with you. Ruin your relationships, ruin your reputation. People won't want to be around you. That's the end result of this, right? And why, when we think about the purpose of words, right, to develop some sort of purpose or relationship or goal, saying too many words is almost always detrimental to that goal, whatever it happens to be. Now, a couple of things, sort of 1A and 1B and 1C, that's what they are in my notes. 1A, slow down in our speech. I have a real problem with this, obviously. I don't think he's talking about the speed of the words, but although necessarily. Proverbs 29:20, do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Now, I don't think it's talking about words per minute here, necessarily. I think he's talking about one who has knowledge or receives some information and then immediately wants to share it, right? It comes in, it comes out, right? That's what he's talking about, who's hasty in that. And what does he say? There's more hope for a fool than that person. When you learn something, especially in relationships, or when you learn something about a person or a situation, sit on it for a bit. Think about it. Consider the ramifications. When you learn something, especially something that's juicy, I use that word juicy, that's a phrase that means what? It's something that other people want to hear. Maybe it's dramatic and it'll cause drama and ooh, people were really, really excited and ooh, did you hear what so-and-so did? And no, just slow down, sit on it for a bit, think about it for a bit. Which goes to sort of 1B here, right? Which is get your facts straight, okay? Use less words. Slow down, get your facts straight. Now, when we think about this, we could read a proverb, Proverbs 11:9. With his mouth, the godless man would destroy his neighbor, but by knowledge, the righteous are delivered. And again, the contrast here is using his mouth to destroy versus knowledge. Because what would destroy his neighbor is he says something that's untrue about his neighbor. And this is what happens again, right? You learn something about somebody, something that somebody did, or something that's happened to somebody, or something that happened at work, and it could be news too, right? You heard that, oh, such and such happened with COVID. I don't know what it is, whatever it is that you heard about COVID, and you immediately want to share it. Slow down, get your facts straight, make sure that what you know is true, instead of just immediately repeating it. Even though it might be interesting and people might be enticed by it, you might get a lot of likes on your post and engagement, slow down, sit on it, get your facts straight. And then the third sort of corollary of this, 1C, is talk to the right people. Consider who you're talking to when you think about the words that you say. Proverbs 25:9-10. Argue your case with your neighbor himself and do not reveal another's secret. Lest he who hears you bring shame upon you and your ill repute have no end. Have you noticed that there's a lot of conflicts with the neighbor here? Now, Jesus, of course, when we talk about the word neighbor in Scripture, of course, they ask Jesus, who's my neighbor? And he gives them the story of the Good Samaritan. I think Solomon's view is sort of narrower, right? He's not thinking about it in the way that Jesus does, because he is thinking about the people in your life. This is what this word means, the neighbor, which I guess is technically what Jesus meant too. But I do think that Solomon's has more of a view of, the people that you interact with on a daily basis. Maybe the person that lives next to you, but it might be a coworker, might be a family member, but the people that you interact with on a regular basis, and you learn something about somebody, instead of talking about it with a third party or some other person, something that you don't like about your neighbor or something that is bothering you about your neighbor, instead of going and telling it to somebody else, go to your neighbor and talk to them, the person that you have a conflict with. Now, Jesus repeats this idea in Matthew 18, right? You have your brother sins against you, go to him, you and him alone. And then, of course, there's this process. But Solomon's giving this wisdom thousands of years prior lest he who hears you bring shame upon you and your ill repute have no end. Because again, this all goes back to the idea of the simple babbler. People who talk too much, who overshare, who say things they're not sure about, who don't fact check, who don't make sure that what they're saying is right, who are willing to share everything with everybody they ever meet, who are willing to tell everything they know about a situation to anybody who wonders. You develop a reputation as somebody not to be trusted, somebody not to be a friend with. That's the end result, right? Ill repute, being known as a simple babbler. By the way, when the Bible uses the word simple, it kind of means dumb or fool, right? Somebody who is, he's not really got it all together, right? That's the idea of the word simple in the Bible. So we're thinking about being controlled, letting our information sit in our minds and thinking about it for a bit, thinking about who we're talking to. And then most of the time, I think the end result is you just don't need to say a lot of stuff. Not everything. There's some things that need to be said. And so that leads us to number 2. Actually, I'm going to check my phone for comments. Yeah, Bob says, think before you speak. That's the easiest way to say this, right? Just think before you speak. And sometimes you need to think overnight. And sometimes you need to think over the weekend, which we'll come back to. Number 2, remember the power of words. So we're talking a lot about the consequences of words, right? Because the end result is words have power. Words affect real change in the world. The old adage is the pen is mightier than the sword, right? The idea that the things that we say have real, tangible effect on reality. This is why it's so important to be so controlled and thoughtful in the things that we say. Proverbs 12:18-20. There is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts. Have you ever been pierced by the sword of somebody's words? Somebody says something to you and it's like you've been stabbed. I'm sure that's happened to you, right? Because you know that words have power. But the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. Now, you think about how these go together. Rash words, a lying tongue, those who devise evil. These all go together. Contrasted with what? The tongue of the wise, the truthful lips, those who plan peace. Our words can really hurt people. And I know you know this, but it's good to be reminded. Because here's what we tend to think. No, that's not a good way of saying that. Here's what people do. We as people. We know intellectually that that's true, that words have power, that words can hurt or heal. But somehow it's like we ignore it when we're saying the words. Oh, my words certainly can't do that. But then when other people speak to us, we know it's true because other people's words hurt us and other people's words help us. But then somehow when I'm speaking, it's like none of the rules apply to me. That's what we do, right? So we're reminding, one of the things is I'm reminding you about these things in this lesson. Proverbs 18:20-21. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruits. This is an interesting sort of set of ideas about fruit and being satisfied. This is about eating. It seems to be about eating, but it's not really about eating. It's about the satisfaction of the heart, right? For the fruit of a man's mouth, from the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. The way that you speak affects your sense of purpose and satisfaction, right? If you're a person who speaks wise and says good things, that's going to be beneficial to your life. It's going to give your life purpose and joy and peace. Going back to the idea of planning peace. Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Either way, either death or life. The way that we speak, the idea of sort of what goes around comes around, is apt here. The way that we speak will lead to either a good life or a bad life. Good relationships, bad relationships. Success at work, failure at work. Business, friendships, parenting, anything you want to, any sort of topic that has any other people involved, because the way that we interact with people primarily is words. That's how thoughts are communicated, how we get on the same page with people. So if my words are negative and untruthful, and they're deceptive, and they're mean, and they're rash. We can think about the words that have been used in Proverbs, right? The end result of that will be, my life is emptier. Because I won't have friends. I won't have good family relationships. I won't do well at work. Because the way that my words affect people, in turn, affects how they view me, right? And so if I'm the kind of person that's encouraging, and I'm speaking true things, and I'm bringing healing with my words, and I'm planning peace, and it's not that I'm saying things that everybody likes all the time. We'll get to that in just a minute. But if I'm being this kind of person that says these kinds of things, that will lead to a better life. It absolutely will. One more verse in this subject. Like clouds, Proverbs 25:14-15. Like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. With patience, a ruler may be persuaded. With a soft tongue will break bone. What do we see here? Empty promises. How does that lead people to perceive you? Clouds and wind without rain. The bad stuff without any of the good, right? Nobody likes clouds. Well, I like clouds and wind, but not as much, I guess. But the rain is beneficial at least, right? He's talking about bad weather that has some purpose. The rain is good because it waters the crops. But then there's just bad weather without any benefit. It's like a person who what? Who boasts of a gift he does not give. With patience, even a ruler, and that's sort of the even is sort of implied there in parentheses. Even a ruler may be persuaded. With patience, a soft tongue will break a bone. Your words can accomplish things if they aren't empty, if they're backed up by action, if they're true, if they're wise, right? Your words can have great power. One of the ways that this is accomplished is our third subject for tonight, is read the room. Be aware that different circumstances require different words, right? Proverbs 15:1-4, which really, I think, says a lot about this. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of the fools pour out folly. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. This might have been in the wrong section, but we'll talk about it now anyway, because here it is. A soft answer turns away wrath. A harsh word stirs up anger. Oh, I think this is supposed to go in the previous section, but we'll talk about it now. What's the point? The way that I speak has an effect on circumstances. And so I need to be aware of my circumstances, because the way I speak is going to change what's happening around me with people. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouths of the fools pour out folly. Have you ever been around a fool who just seems to say the wrong thing all the time? You ever been around a person like that? Maybe you are that person. Maybe I'm that person who just seems to always say the wrong thing all the time. Is it encouraging to be around such people? Is it nice to be around such people? Maybe even they're saying nice stuff, but sometimes you're just like, man, that was not the time to say that, right? A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. When we are perverse in our words, it can break a person. Let's see. Yeah, this is more in line with, I think that verse was supposed to be in the previous section. Proverbs 25:20. Whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day, and like vinegar on soda. What's the idea here? Well, you'd think, well, singing songs, that's nice, it's pleasant, it's giving somebody joy, it's something that's uplifting and encouraging, but what's the point? You don't sing songs to a heavy heart. That's like taking off a garment on a cold day. You need the comfort and the warmth of the garment. When somebody has a heavy heart, what are you supposed to do with them? Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. That's how Paul would say it. To think about how your words are going to affect somebody. And ultimately what I think he's driving at in Proverbs 25:20 is having compassion and empathy. I see that somebody's down and sad, and I'm not just going to act like everything's great. I'm going to try to comfort them, and I'm going to try to support them and lift them up, right? That's what I'm going to do. Even though maybe in another time, being happy and joyful and playing around, like that would be really encouraging to somebody, but there are times when it's not, even if that is how your relationship normally is. Be aware of the situation that you're in. Proverbs 27:14. Whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice rising early in the morning will be counted as cursing. Oh, I really feel this one. I feel this one deep in my bones. Because you know what? I do love my kids. I love playing with my kids. You know when I don't want to play with my kids? Is early in the morning. I don't want to do it then. Now I do it because, they're up and it is what it is. But the way that he's using this phrase, yeah, it's good to bless people. We think, oh yeah, I should bless my neighbor. I should be boisterous in my blessing of my neighbor. But man, if he's trying to sleep, not going to go well. Thinking about, it's not just what you say, the content of your words. You can't measure the wisdom of words in a vacuum, right? You think about the things you're saying and you think, well, yeah, that's a good thing to say in a vacuum, but words are never put into a vacuum. They're put into a situation. There's the context of the relationship. There's the context of what's going on. Are you at work? Are you at home? Are you at the playground? I don't know how many of you spend time at the playground. I do because I have kids. Are you camping? All these different circumstances we might be in, even if a thing might be good to say, normally, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily good to say at a funeral. Conversely, the things you might say at a funeral, probably not great to say at a birthday party. Words exist in context. So we need to be thinking about how our words fit the context, right? And this goes back to the previous one. Well, the first one, right? About slowing down and thinking before you speak and taking time to think about it. Because ultimately, you might have a good impulse. Oh yeah, that's definitely good to say, and you just say it. That's being hasty, right? You think, oh, there's nothing wrong about what I'm saying here, and you just automatically blurt it out. But taking time to think about the words that you're going to speak, right? Let me check my phone, see if there's any comments or thoughts. Nope. Number 4, as we're coming to the end here. Number 4, pretty simple. Be honest. This is not a Proverbs exclusive thing, right? This is a universal truth, a thing that God wants from his people. Proverbs 19:5 and 19:9 are almost identical. I'll put them up there one after the other. A false witness will not go unpunished. He who breathes out lies will not escape. A false witness will not go unpunished. He who breathes out lies will perish. It's interesting, these are 4 verses apart. Do you think that Solomon thought it might need to be repeated? In case you missed it the first time, let me repeat myself. A false witness will not go unpunished. He who breathes out lies will perish. Proverbs 26:18 through 19. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I'm only joking. Oh man, have you ever known anybody like that? Ugh. They do something you don't like. Oh, can't you just take a joke? Now, he's specifically talking about the man who deceives his neighbor, but I would put a lot of things in category. Insults, making fun of somebody, right? If your words are hurtful to a person, you can't make it right by just saying, oh, I was just joking. That's not how it works, right? Your words have impact. And let's put it back up there. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I'm only joking. I'm only joking, as the person burns to death. That's in the analogy, right? He's throwing firebrands, arrows, and death. As the person is dying, don't worry about it. I was only joking. But that's the effect our words have, right? The sword thrust of the deceit and the lies and the hurt doesn't just automatically go away. Oh, don't worry about it. I was just kidding. That's not how it works. Be honest in what you say to people, because lies hurt. Lies are destructive. In Proverbs 28:3. This kind of goes back to the one who conceals hatred. Proverbs 28:3. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor. Oh, no. I'm watered down the wrong pipe there. Sorry about that. I had to mute before I coughed. Let's start that over. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor than he who flatters with his tongue. This is an interesting contrast. There's the rebuking and the flattering. And this goes back to the same idea I had previously. Don't be a yes friend. When I say yes friend, I mean somebody who just agrees because you don't like conflict. You just agree with whatever somebody says because you don't want to deal with the conflict. How do I say this graciously? You're kind of being a coward. If you're the kind of friend who only agrees with somebody because you're afraid of having conflict. You don't really think it's right. You don't really think they should do it, whatever it happens to be. You don't really think it's righteous, especially in matters of righteousness. But you just sort of go along with it because you want to seem like you're a good friend, or you want to, I don't know, whatever reason we put in there. If you have good reason, and the word rebuke is the key here, right? You rebuke somebody in a Christian context. You rebuke somebody who is sinning or doing something destructive with their relationship with God. Now, I don't know if Solomon's thinking about that, but in the context of Scripture as a whole, be the kind of person who is brave enough to speak truth, even if it might be a little uncomfortable. And what's the advice of Solomon here? Let's see, this might not be Solomon. I can't remember who wrote Proverbs 28. Whoever rebukes a man will afterward find more favor. I'm reading a comment on YouTube. Hold on. Lila, I'm really trying to understand your comment. Maybe you need to, maybe I'm misreading it. Another layer to word like the spoil is the filter used to understand them, like lust of the flesh, pride of life, etc. I'm not quite sure I understand that. I think there's maybe a word missing in what you've typed there. What's the point that what Solomon is saying in Proverbs 28:23? Friendship is deeper, and you know people like this in your life. The people who are willing to call you on the things that you're wrong about, the people who are willing to help you be better, the people who are willing to actually, righteously correct you, those are the people that I think we feel most close to. And it's not always pleasant, it's not always nice, but part of being honest with one another is I'm going to say things that maybe are a little bit difficult sometimes. Now, I'm doing it with the right intention, I'm doing it with the right attitude. Soil, like the soil is the filter used to understand them. Yeah, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, etc. Yeah, and you think about, oh man, now I have like 8 different thoughts. There's intent, there's the things that we say, and there's the intent behind them, right? When we are thinking about verses like this, well, you might look at this verse and think, well, man, I can just be a jerk and tell everybody all the ways I don't like what they're doing. That's not what this verse is talking about, right? I'm reading a comment on YouTube again. Yeah, how it's understood. Says Lila, how it is understood. When we think about the things that we're saying, yeah, how it's understood when you say and then you only say, oh, I was just joking. Yeah, it's about how these words are understood. And this goes back to the rebuke too, right? Because if you are the kind of person that just sort of goes around and you're a jerk all the time and you think, oh yeah, I'm just telling people what they need to do better, but people don't really think you have their best interests at heart, and people don't think that you really care about them, then that rebuke is not going to result in favor. That rebuke is going to be understood as insults or meanness, right? So there's not just the words that we say, there's the intent behind them. And there's also, again, the context of the relationship. Because when I think about the people that have rebuked me in the past, that have really benefited me in my life, it's not people that I knew for like an hour. It's not acquaintances. It's not people that I didn't have a close relationship with. It's people that I had developed a relationship with who came to me and told me, Chris, I think you're doing this wrong. And I appreciated that because I understood where it came from, the place that it came from. And one of the things I'm really trying to stress here as we wrap this up, words exist in a context. And the way that we speak depends on who we're speaking to, the situation we're in, the previous history with that person, right? The mental state of that person, right? Because I'm going to say some different things based on how that other person is feeling. We have to be more thoughtful in how we speak, which brings us to the last sort of main idea, the key to success. And one of the things that I think we maybe don't do enough is planning our words. Proverbs 15:23. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. Proverbs 15:28. The heart of the righteous person ponders, thinks about how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. And I like the contrast between ponders and pours, right? The idea of pondering is I'm thinking about the right thing, and it sort of in again, these verses are very close together. I'm thinking about the apt answer, the right thing to say. And again, I'm not going to, when we think about the first point in this, using less words, I'm thinking about how to be precise in my language. The apt answer, the thing that will be most beneficial at a particular time, as opposed to the heart of the wicked who just, the idea of pouring out, like I'm just going to pour out all of the water. Like, so if I have this water bottle here, right, I'm just going to pour it all out. Oh, I'm really glad the lid was on. I'm just going to pour it all out, as opposed to the like just taking a sip that is refreshing and smooth. If I dump it on my head, well, that's horrible. The idea of pondering how to answer. The righteous person thinks about what they say instead of just saying whatever comes to mind. And might I suggest one thing as we close? Especially in tricky areas of life, it's not a bad idea to plan out what you're going to say. And this might be at work. This might be in your marriage relationship. It might be with a friend, especially when we have more difficult circumstances. And it could be something that needs to be a rebuke. It could be something that needs to be a comfort, like a friend is hurting, or a friend is something is bad in their life that they need help with, or could be advice that somebody needs, or even it could be encouragement. But taking the time, instead of thinking I'm going to encourage this person and then going there and just sort of winging it off the cuff, taking the time to plan out what you're going to say. There's no rule that says you have to just make up stuff on the moment. And I think sometimes we have this idea that spontaneity is somehow more sincere. It can be, but there can be a lot of sincerity, maybe even more sincerity, in something that is not spontaneous. Because what does that show? It showed that you cared enough about the circumstance to take time prior to, however long it took you. You weren't just thinking about it in the moment. You took time ahead of time to plan out a thing to say. Tracy tells the story of, Stan used to tell it, Tracy tells it now. I tell it now too, actually. But Stan would tell the story of, I don't remember exactly what church it was. A guy that Stan used to be at a church that Stan preached at. And what he would do is he would, every Sunday, he would go and encourage a couple, a person, somebody. And everybody was just so happy to always see him. And Stan talked to him one time and said, you know, how is it that you always say something so encouraging to people? Because every Sunday he would just, it would light up their faces. They would be so happy about whatever it was that he said. And Stan didn't overhear it all the time. He would just see an interaction, you know. And so he asked this guy, how do you always say the right thing? And the guy said, I think about it every week. I think to myself, this is the person I'm going to encourage. And I think, this is what I'm going to say to them. Instead of just deciding that spur of the moment, that guy, every week, took the time to plan what he was going to say. He pondered how to answer. And it ended up being, I think, much more encouraging. So, as we conclude this, we're a little over time. Sort of recap this. Number 1, speak less. Number 2, I've already forgotten what number 2 was. Number 2, oh yeah, remember the power of words. Number 3, read the room. Understand the circumstance that you're in. And number 4, of course, be honest. But really the key to success with our words is to plan them. Be more thoughtful in how we speak and what we're going to say. Let me look at my phone for any more comments. Being purposeful, says Stephanie Martz. And, you know, I use this word so much about being purposeful or intentional, about having a purpose in what we're trying to understand or what we're trying to accomplish. Instead of just sort of winging it in the moment, having a purpose for what we say is going to end up, I think, giving much more benefit to who we are speaking to. But it's also, again, and I want to reiterate this, going to benefit us because it's going to improve our relationships. It's going to improve how people think of us. It's going to improve, I think it's going to improve the goodwill that we have in our communities if we're much more intentional and purposeful about what we say. Let's end in a prayer, and then we'll wrap it up. God, we thank you for the day you've given us that we can spend in your creation. We're thankful for the time that we've had together to study your word. I ask you, please give us wisdom in our speech as we think about what to say to other people. Help us to be thoughtful and to be honest and to be earnest, to say the kinds of things that are beneficial to each other, even if those things might be difficult. Help us to control our words, to not have the impulse to just say everything we want to say. Help us to be more controlled than that. We are thankful for your words, the words of your scriptures, the words that you've given us, that we would know how to live the lives that are good and righteous and with purpose. We thank you for your scripture, and we thank you for your Son. We ask you, please help us this week to live out lives that are glorifying to you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, that will wrap it up for us tonight. I think that next week we are going to, if you want to be preparing for it, next week we're going to talk about hard work and laziness in Proverbs. Sunday morning is going to be, again, no Bible class, and worship at 10. I think that's it. I don't really have anything else that I'm supposed to say, I don't think. Inevitably, here's what happens. I close the video, and then somebody says, oh, I should have said X, Y, or Z. But that's okay. I think that's it. Newsletter. Oh, yeah. I just want to remind you, if you didn't get the newsletter on Tuesday, let the office know your email, and we'll add you to that. And I think that's it. Oh, you want to rephrase one more time, reiterate. Parents of children, that curriculum. I've downloaded more of the curriculum. It's called Share Faith curriculum. The link to that was in the newsletter. If you have trouble accessing it, let me know. There's videos and worksheets and lesson plans to go over with your kids. Please do not neglect the teaching of our children. So if you need help with that, let me know. Other than that, I hope you have a good evening, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you on Sunday. Those who we don't see, I hope you'll be watching on the stream, and if you need communion, you can come pick it up. Have a good rest of your night. Thanks, and God bless.